Hello and welcome to a how-to video. Somebody sent in a request asking if I would explain all the ink pads that we do. So this is our Archival Stampin Pad in black, our Memento Tuxedo Black ink pad, and our Staz On in jet black. There are three blacks, and I'm going to go on and explain some of the others as well. So the Staz On is particularly good. This does paper, but it also does ceramics, metals, glass. Any project that you've got that's slightly different, you can put that, you can use this to stamp on, apart from fabric, so they don't recommend that you do it on fabric. It's an acid-free ink, which means it's archival. You can use it on all of your scrapbook projects and things that you want to last, and it's a very jet black, so when you lift off the lid, that's what it looks like. It has a distinctive smell, and it has a clear plastic cover, so I actually just glued up mine onto the lid, and that means you don't have to take it off every time you want to use it. So a great solvent based ink pad, and it has its own particular cleaner, so the Staz On is different that way. You can't use our Stampin' Mist and Scrub to clean it off. You need its own solvent cleaner, which I'll show you later on. The Memento Tuxedo Black ink pad is, again, it's a permanent ink pad. It's archival, acid free. It looks kind of fairly identical to the Staz On. It's great for all kinds of paper, including coated paper. It's not made for, you know, the other things that the Staz On does, so the wood and the metal and things like that, but great for watercolouring, and I'm going to show you that in a little minute. So that's a very good ink pad. The black is quite more muted, it's a lot more matte looking than the other two ink pads, so if you want a more subtle kind of a black, then the Memento is great for that. And then moving on to our Archival Stampin Pad. So I'm using the Rose Wonder set and the Archival ink pad, and I'm going to show you this one first. So yep, just give it a push, flip it open, slide it in, and nice big surface to stamp on. So, you know, our basic black, because of the size of the ink pad, it's good for your bigger stamps. And I'm just going to press it down. This is just a little line art image from the Rose Wonder set. And I don't know if you can see, very clear, very crisp, and I'm using the Shimmery White cardstock. If you haven't got the Shimmery White cardstock, it's particularly good. It's a kind of off-white, so it goes with all of our colours because it's not white and it's not vanilla. It has a little shimmer in it, which you can't see on the video, but it's really stunning. It looks like you've put kind of the wink of Stella over it. It's really lovely, and it's perfect for watercolouring. So it's not only does it look like a normal cardstock, it has that extra quality as well. So I'm going to do the same again with the Memento, stamp it in the other corner. I want you to just be able to see the difference. And then I'm going to do the same again with the last one. Now it's really difficult to see on the video, but the Tuxedo Black is much more matte. It doesn't have the same crispness to it, so that is worth remembering when you're ordering your blacks. And then I'm going to do the same with the Staz On. Now I cleaned both of those stamps off with the Scrub and the Mist, but I can't do that with the Staz On. I need to use the solvent based remover, and again just stamping it in the middle so that you can see the difference. I found that this came up as crisp as the jet black Stampin' Up Archival ink pad, and the Memento was a lot more muted. You can't also see very well from the video, but there's no bleed with the Stampin' Up Archival ink pad or the Staz On ink pad, but there was a little bit of bleed into the paper with the Memento. So it hasn't stayed quite as crisp on the surface as the other two. Then I decided I was going to show you how to wash over the top of it. So I've just squeezed a standard ink pad, it's the Tempting Turquoise one, and obviously the ink's pooled on the top. You can use a re-inker if you'd rather, but I just find squeezing it is fine. And then I've taken our Aqua Painter. Now there's two different kinds of Aqua Painter. They both come in a set together. You have one with a white lid and one with the blue lid, and the one with the blue lid, you can see the nib is a lot longer than the one with the white nib, so I would use the smaller one if I'm doing something kind of delicate or a smaller image. And then you just run off the side of your grid paper, just let the water flow, and then pick up that ink, and I usually let the water flow into the ink pad a little just to moisten it up so it's not so kind of stiff. And then I'm just going to brush over the top of this image that has had a few minutes to dry, so that you can see if anything happened to the black with the water over the top. So if you're going to use this for watercolouring, it's important to know if any of the blacks perform better than the others. So I've given it the same amount of water over each, and I found that all of the blacks stayed as crisp as they were before I put the water over. There was no difference in them at all. The Stampin' Up! One was really impressive. I don't know if you can see very well, but it's very crisp and very clear, and the Staz On is too. But what I really like is that the Stampin' Up! One can be cleaned with the Stampin' Mist and the scrub, so you don't need a special cleaner, so there's no extra expense on the top. The only thing is it's just perfect for paper. So if you want, you know, to stamp on ceramics or anything slightly different, you do need the Staz On, which means you also need the cleaner. But the Stampin' Up! One performed brilliantly on paper, so I was really pleased to see that. So to clean off your stamp, you just get this Staz On Cleaner and just kind of squeeze it just a tiny bit, and then you can either take a tissue or a baby wipe and wipe off the ink. And it's very oily, it's a solvent based cleaner. So then what I usually do is, once I've gotten rid of the ink and most of the oil of the solvent cleaner, I just kind of clean it in my scrub as well. So there it is, back to normal. Sometimes your stamps do mark with the black inks, especially the photopolymer, but it doesn't affect the performance of them, just the look, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Now I'm going to show you the white. So I've grabbed a piece of coloured cardstock, and this is our Whisper White Craft ink. It's the only craft ink pad that we do have in our range now, and I wanted to show you now. I'm not sure how well inked up my pad is. It's enough that the images come out crisp, but if you get a brand new one, it might come out a little bit crisper than my image has. And I've done it twice because the craft ink pad is a very wet ink pad, and I'm going to show you that in a second, but you can also heat emboss from it. So I've got our white embossing powder, and I'm going to tip it over the top, and again just a standard white ink pad, not VersaMark, and you can still heat emboss from it, so you get the both kind of looks. And then I've just tipped it in, and I usually move it out of the way because I end up having some sort of accident with it if I don't. And then I've just got the heat tool, and I'm just going to heat it up and cover it all so that it melts. So I'll let you see that. So you can see a difference between the one that's been heat embossed and the one that hasn't. A nice kind of crisp white with the powder over the top. And then I wanted to show you how wet it is when you first stamp, just to warn you. So I've just stamped, and you can see smudge, and also it went onto my hand as well. So you do have to let your craft ink pad dry a little bit before you use it if you're not going to heat emboss it. If you're going to heat emboss it, you need to heat emboss it as soon as possible so that it's still wet. And then I wanted to show you the VersaMark ink pad. So this is a fantastic all-round ink pad. It's again archival, and this is a brilliant one for having a subtle background in your images or your cards, but also for heat embossing from. So I'm going to do it twice so you can see the same kind of effect. So you get like a watermark effect, like you get in kind of expensive paper. If you hold it up to the light, you can see that watermark. And that's the idea behind this ink pad. And it's got a little bit of a shine, it'd be a little bit wet, so if you put your finger on it, you would affect the ability for it to emboss. And I'd also got a little bit of wet on this card. I must have smudged it with my finger, and I saw it and I thought, oh, it'll be alright, and then I heat embossed it and realised no, it's not okay, because I had a little bit of powder stuck to that. So you can use the little powder tool, which is kind of like an anti-static tool, and it takes off any static from the paper so that when you put the powder down it doesn't stick to it, but I didn't use that, so I'm now having to get a paper piercer and kind of scrape off any little bits of powder that have stuck to bits that they shouldn't have. So if you're using VersaMark, you do want to heat emboss fairly soon. If you're using it as a background, it's not going to smudge, so you can just, you know, keep going with your stamping and do the whole background or whatever it is you want to do. So our Craft White and our VersaMark, you can heat emboss from both of those. The VersaMark is not tacky or anything like that, but it will take all of the powders. The Craft White, you're better to just put white on that. So it depends on what look you're going for. If you heat emboss white all the time, you might just want to go for the Craft. If you think you're going to do a variety of different colour powders, the VersaMark is your go-to. And also it kind of acts like a multi-colour ink pad, in that whatever colour card you stamp on, it looks like a slightly darker version of that, so it's brilliant. Now I'm just going to show you the Shimmery White and a few different of our papers with our classic ink pads. So our classic stamping pads come in lots of different colours, including, you know, 5 ink colours that change every year. And I wanted to show you them on a few different papers. So again, this is our Shimmery White watercolour stroke standard cardstock. You can do both with it. And our ink pads, they changed the style a little while back and they're firm foam now. And they are a lot more juicy, sometimes maybe slightly too juicy, and you have to take a bit of the ink off. That's not a fault, that's okay, you can take them off. And it just means that you get a nice amount of ink to use. You don't have to press down very hard though, so that's one thing you need to know when you're using them. And then I went and used the watercolour paper and just some standard Whisper White cardstock. So this is our watercolour paper. It's kind of got hills and valleys, but the image came out perfectly clear on it. And then I did the same again with our Whisper White, and just pressed it down, and then I've laid all 3 colours of the card together, so you can see the image, I think, comes out just as clearly on each of them. Maybe kind of pops a little bit more on the white just because of the contrast, and you can see that the Shimmery White is kind of an in-between colour, so it's just between the 2 of them. And that is our basic ink pad, so I hope that that's been helpful to you. If any of those you're not sure about, then please pop a question in the comments below or go to my blog quickandeasycraft.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also send me an email, and I hope you have fun using yours. Thanks for joining me.